Hey everyone, it's Dave Asprey with the Bulletproof Executive. Today, you're going to hear more from Jonathan Bailor. Jonathan is author of a brand new book called The Calorie Myth. If you check it out on YouTube, I'm actually holding the book up right now so you can see it. It's a book right after my own heart. In fact, I believe that one of the chapters in my upcoming book was tentatively titled The Calorie Myth because, well, Jonathan and I are in alignment here. But here's why I like Jonathan. He's collaborated with some top scientists for over 10 years, looked at 1,300 studies, 10,000 pages of research, and his work has been endorsed by top doctors from Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins, Yale, UCLA, and things like that. So Jonathan's a pretty credible nutrition and exercise expert, but he also has 25 patents, and he's a senior program manager at Microsoft. So, I mean, if there's anyone else on earth with a similar background to me, these crazy tech guys who come over and become biohackers, it's Jonathan. So I always have a great time talking with you, Jonathan. Welcome to the show.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Dave. Thank you.
You are most welcome. Well, let's talk about your new book. I'm pretty excited. We covered some of this in the last podcast about the calorie myth in general, but why are you doing this now? Like why is this book coming out at December 31st, I think is the plan? Why is this the right time for the world to wake up to this problem?
Well, we're going in the wrong direction, Dave, right? We're trying harder and harder and harder, and we're getting fatter and fatter and sicker and sicker. And sadly, that's not the case for everyone, right? I mean, your audience knows what they're doing. They're part of this amazing 1% of our population that understands that quality is really the focus, food quality, exercise quality, but the mainstream keeps telling the other 99% of our population that they just need to worry about quantity, the quantity of calories they're consuming and the quantity of calories they burn off manually exercising. And that's really a dehumanizing way to treat people, that we should spend our time and energy counting calories. And it also just doesn't work, and it hasn't worked for the past 50 years, and our economy can't sustain this model, so we've got to do something about it.
I've started to believe, this is going to shock you, that calories actually do count. Now, they count in a way that is counterintuitive. What happens if you don't get enough calories?
Yeah, so to be clear, calories count. The calorie myth is not that calories are unicorns, they don't exist. The calorie myth is that we need to consciously think about calories. Calories absolutely exist, and they have existed. However, no one knew what a calorie was, let alone counted them, up until the beginning of the obesity epidemic. So I find it hard to believe that counting them is required to avoid obesity.
It feels like we have this natural animal instinct that says eat more or eat less. And certainly Gary Taubes has written about that. And we've studied this ad nauseum. So we know that when people don't eat enough calories, that they slow down, they get colder, their metabolism slows down, they eat more, their metabolism speeds up, and they move more. So we already have all this, but we have this idea that instead of handling it like from an animalistic or an intuitive perspective, that we need to handle it from a conscious kind of mechanistic perspective. But what about people who don't eat enough calories? Like I go to restaurants now and they're advertising like it's in my interest. Oh, look, 100-calorie meal. I'm like, number one, if it's 100 calories, it's not a meal. It's not even a snack, right? Okay, yep. But you're going to charge me more for less food because we're counting calories. What if I really did eat a 200 or 300-calorie breakfast or lunch or dinner and I thought it was going to fuel me? Like, what are the biological impacts of that going to be?
Starvation is certainly not healthy, nor is it sexy. And we need to remember that. But just if you do not fuel your body appropriately, I mean, what happens to your car if you don't put gas in the tank? I mean, in some ways, this conversation is stupid. Not to say that you're stupid, but like, hey, people, you're obviously not stupid. But the fact that we need to remind people that eating food and fueling your body is a good thing and is important shows how sick our culture has become, right? The fact that we have to remind people that starvation is not healthy is bad. If you do not put fuel in a car, the car cannot run. If you do not put fuel in your body cannot run. Your mind cannot run. It's not a bad thing to eat. In fact, eating is one of the most important parts of life, and we need to do more of it, just smarter.
We do. And we shouldn't have to have this conversation, but I know so many people, particularly women, who have been kind of sold on this. It's always, at least in the last 100 years, been, appropriate for women to daintily pick at a few leaves on their plate instead of actually eating. And I find it attractive when a woman says, "Oh my God, is that butter? Like pass it over," right? And "Oh, is that salt? Let me put some on top." Like a woman who eats is going to be healthy, and I like spending time with healthy people whose brains are turned on, right? And that said, when you don't get enough calories, especially the right high quality calories, but when you don't get just enough food at all, things like adrenal dysfunction happen. What's your take on the link between a lack of food, not just healthy food, but a lack of food in general, and things like adrenal dysfunction or cognitive cloudiness or anything like that? What's your thoughts on that?
So there's a 1-2 punch here, Dave, and I also want to get back to the female topic because that's really one of the most insidious aspects of the calorie myth is the suppression of women, and that's a wonder. We should absolutely talk about that.
Yes.
But the 1-2 punch there. So first of all, we don't eat food. So most people are eating things that are not high in required things like vitamins, minerals, essential amino acids, essential fatty acids. So if you're eating Twinkies and Ding Dongs and Ho-Hos, you're already not getting enough of those. Then if you cut back the amount of Twinkies, Ding Dongs, and Ho-Hos you're eating, you're doubly malnourished. So you don't have enough energy, and you don't have enough, to continue the car analogy, you don't have gas in your tank, nor do you have windshield wiper fluid, nor do you have oil. You just and you took the air out of your tires. I mean, you're really just in bad shape. This is why, not to get too controversial, but gastric bypass and these types of surgeries, any surgery or mechanistic approach that helps people to eat less is, in those situations, it's even more critical to think about the quality of food we're eating. Because if you can only take in 800 calories a day, you better believe that those 800 calories have to be picture perfect, or you're going to cause more problems than you had beforehand. So when we say to people eat less, we really have to think about how deleterious that recommendation is, because most people don't eat food. 40 to 60% of the calories of the average American are not coming from food. They're coming from nutrient poor edible products. So if I'm already nutrient deficient and you tell me to eat less, well, you actually did make a great case study for the pharmaceutical industry, and maybe that's why it's growing so quickly.
I like the car analogy and certainly use it a lot. Brain octane oil. Octane is what you put in there. But what if you took a car and you made the gas tank way smaller? Would you run out of gas more often? Yeah. If you put the highest octane, purest racing fuel you could get in that car, it would go a little further before it ran out of gas. But I don't believe that that's an appropriate surgery for people as a weight loss mechanism, because it's just unnecessary when you understand how the metabolism works. To the point that with Bulletproof Coffee, there are people who will lose a pound a day when they have a lot of weight to lose. And I'm sure you've experienced the same thing with your clients, where people can lose weight pretty much effortlessly when they get the food thing right.
Yeah, the only time I've seen, let's call them physical interventions, be appropriate is when we're dealing more with addiction scenarios. For example, if someone's addicted to heroin, oftentimes a physical intervention is needed because that person just literally has lost all control. It's not a willpower issue at that point. Their brain has been hijacked, as you know all about neurological function. So there are plenty of clinical cases of food being treated like a heroin or a cocaine. In fact, study just came out showing that the white part of Oreo cookies actually activates more opiate receptors in the brain than cocaine does. So for individuals who are literally addicted to food, these are people who are eating till they're vomiting, eating till they're sick. I mean, this is a bad, bad place.
So I need to stop freebasing Oreos. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So I shouldn't say what I was going to say. So yes, stop freebasing Oreos. But the key takeaway for any mechanistic intervention is that's to help people just regain neurological control. And then if you're going to do that, if you're going to shrink your car's gas tank, if you do still want to drive from point A to point B, you better make sure the best fuel possible is in there, even more so than you did before. So that's just a really important nuance, right? Because if a person ever gets a weight loss surgery thinking that it will just help them eat less and they can keep up the habits, that will kill them. Literally, it will kill them.
Yeah. And we're seeing that the first sign of that decline is fertility in men and women. Like one of the first parts to shut down when you go down that path is not enough calories or not enough nutrition in the calories you eat, both of which are important. You start seeing that fall down, and then you see the obesity, and it does lead to an earlier death than otherwise would happen. But a lot of people, okay, we're all going to die at some point. We're not going to think about it because it couldn't happen to me. So let's talk about getting fat. Why will eating more not make people fat? Like, what's the take? This is kind of part one of your book, but I'm asking you to summarize
Yeah.
it.
Well, no doubt, Dave. And I know you're a man who's not afraid of controversy. So before we actually get to that, can we go back to the whole females told they need to eat less and not really enjoy food?
Oh, yeah. Let's just nail that one because, it just makes me sad when I see these women who are like, I'm so tired and I'm cold and I don't feel good and I'm having, monthly mood swings that are insane. And, oh, by the way, I'll split my spinach leaf with you. And I'm like, anyway. So, yeah, let's nail this one. Go for it.
Dave, this is so insidious because we can even look at it from an exercise perspective, right? Women are basically like the way women are told to exercise is generally this cardiovascular, like don't lift weights, shrink yourself. Don't become strong, shrink yourself. Don't eat food, don't fuel yourself, shrink yourself. Be smaller, be second class, be like what are we actually communicating there to women that they should shrink and not be fully there? That's so sad, and it's so like it's 2013. What in God's name?
I saw an awesome sticker. This is funny. I live kind of in the country, so this actually was a sticker on the back of a pickup truck, and it said "Strong is the new skinny." Mm-hmm. And it was driven by this, rock climbing, like take no prisoners. I'm guessing mid-20s woman. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly right. We want to make strong the new skinny, but there's something psychologically evil going on here when people believe that I have to have less fuel and I have to spend the fuel I have doing useless exercise for what outcome? I don't even know what the supposed outcome, I guess, is a flat tummy and looking good. But unfortunately, it doesn't lead to that, and it doesn't lead to any positive outcomes that I know of. How did we get here? Do you know?
Dave, we got here, and it's not just, it doesn't just hit women, it hits all of us. But it gets back to the earlier point you made about this mechanistic view of the body that we need to manually intervene. And I'm a capitalist, right? I love capitalism. I think it's great to make money. The world is a better place. The pie can be grown. It's all goodness. However, if you can convince people that they're broken and that there's problems with them and that your products and services are required for them to function in the world, you can make a lot more money. So for example, if you can convince people that they need to manually balance calories, you can sell them a crap load of stuff to help them to do that. Just like if I convinced you that you need to manually count breaths in and breaths out, you better believe I could sell you a crap load of stuff to help you do that impossible task. Same thing with like vitamin C in and vitamin C out. Or what about thiamine, riboflavin, vitamin D, vitamin E? Like, could you imagine trying to consciously regulate basic biological functions like that? But in a culture where we, especially with females, tell them day in and day out, you're not good enough, you're inadequate, you need this makeup, you need this outfit, you need to do this with your kids, you need to do this for your husband, you need to do that, all this inadequacy, that by default you're inadequate. Well, a lot of bad things happen, and that's obviously wrong, and that's obviously sick. And that might be why a third of our country is now on medication to help them deal with this.
That's not somewhere I thought we'd go in this interview, talking about it. How does this tie back to calories? Because, yeah, we have this marketing message out there that says, pay more money for foods that don't have enough food in them, that also induce food cravings. Let's add a little MSG and NutraSweet to make sure you crave another 100-calorie bar only a half hour later, with the insidious effect of sucking willpower. And this happens to men and women. But certainly any marketer would tell you that women are more susceptible to the body image marketing, and just open any women's magazine, and you'll see that. Then again, open a men's magazine, and how many honestly malnourished guys with super lean six packs do you see? 3% body fat is no healthier for men than it is for women. Yet we're pushing guys in that direction. Is this like a conscious thing that big food companies are doing, or is it just that they don't know how things work?
It's absolutely a conscious thing, right? The only way, think about that. I mean, Dave, this is the most successful marketing case study ever. Because how could you possibly convince people that 200 calories of whatever at McDonald's is a healthy option than to convince people that you can equivalence class everything that's edible and all forms of physical movement using one measure, a calorie? That you can say that's legitimately that 140 calories, people actually believe this, marketers actually say this, 140 calories of spinach is just like 140 calories of Coca-Cola, and you really don't have to worry about it anyway, because let's move, and you can just jog for a half hour and burn off those 140 calories anyway. So they've created this world where a large portion of the world's population believes that jogging is biologically equivalent to spinach, which is biologically equivalent to Coca-Cola. And when you do that, from a marketing perspective, you can now sell anything. Right? I could sell you anything and just shrink the serving size and tell you that it's healthy, or tell you that it fits in part of a moderate and balanced lifestyle. And I can paint anyone who disagrees with me as an extremist, because it's all about moderation and balance, isn't it, Dave?
Jonathan, are you a food terrorist? I think you might be.
It's just all about Dave, just breathe in anything. Just breathe it in moderation, and just drink anything. Like propane is fine, just in moderation, right? Because liquid is liquid, just like a calorie is a calorie.
I actually proposed once on a podcast that we switch from calories to grams. Like, you have to have enough grams of food, because calories are a slightly better measure than grams, because calories remove water. So other than that, though, there really isn't that much difference if you're going to be mechanistic about it. So what's cool about your book is that you've gone through and done some of the core research there that says, all right, here's the facts. So I would encourage people who are interested in this. Certainly, you and I share the same perspective here. If they read your blog, they read your book, they're going to get more details on this than I typically share. But I would say there is no way that a thinking person can look at the totality of the evidence in your book and believe that a calorie is a calorie. You might still think they matter, because you have to have enough fuel to keep your car going. And we have a problem, actually, and maybe you and I are part of it, where we have well-meaning, health-centric people, and they'll go out and they'll eat toasted kale snacks, right? Because they're so nutrient dense. It's the highest quality food you can get out there, right? Or at least it's advertised as that. And the problem is it's a 50 calorie snack, right? So if we say calories don't matter, and then people start ignoring their calories because they're eating such high quality foods, are we contributing to this lack of fuel when we talk only about food quality? Like, do you worry about that?
I don't, because the two things. One is 70% of Americans have plenty of calories already on their body. So, and that's why, things like Bulletproof coffee, et cetera, are effective, right? They just enable you to eat lunch off of your hips rather than something that passed through your lips. Because if you've got 100,000 calories stored on your hips, well, you are not in a state of energy deficit, even if you don't eat necessarily, if your metabolism is on track. So the thing to keep in mind, for me at least, Dave, is that the body is smart, right? We're not going to accidentally starve ourselves, nor will we accidentally overeat if we're eating the right quality of foods. And that's been borne out by every person who's ever lived in every civilization prior to the current three generations. And look at any animal in the animal kingdom, when they're in their natural environment, eating their natural foods, they don't undereat and they don't overeat, just like they don't accidentally take in too much thiamine or accidentally excrete too much thiamine, or they don't overblink, or they don't overpoop, or they don't overbreathe.
God, those last three have been challenges for me, but okay. Overblinking, oh my God.
Stop blinking so much. But we have, I mean, Dave, that's really, some of this is just, we've gone so far off the ranch. Think about Maslow's hierarchy, right? These baseline biological things. Any organism that has survived as long as Homo sapiens, the most successful species on the planet, if we weren't able to use this part of our brain, our animal brain, to take care of these much more fundamental basic functions so that we can spend this part of our brain building technology and loving people and curing world hunger and writing and painting, we would have never gotten to where we are today. So unless we've just gotten horribly stupider in the past 3 generations and now need to manually regulate that which every other animal in the world seems to regulate automatically, if we never heard of a calorie, we would be better off, as evidenced by every generation of people that ever lived prior to the 1970s when calories entered the mainstream.
I don't disagree with you. I think they're a terrible way of thinking about food, as long as you're eating enough. And most people are eating too many nasty calories, to be perfectly honest, with no food in them, which you and I agree on. I'm concerned about the subset of health conscious people who have gone so far on the food quality spectrum that they don't have a conscious feeling for honoring their hunger and feeding it. Yeah. So there's a subset of people listening to this show right now who are high on the food quality spectrum and deficit in basic energy. And I want to make sure that in the zest that we both have for sharing the idea that when you eat more calories, you tend to get thin, or at least more quality calories, you tend to get thinner and feel good, that the message of eating enough calories for fuel isn't lost. And I think that you and I are both there, especially because that affects women more than it affects men, for whatever reason.
And especially, Dave, for people that are already thin, like if you're already thin and fit, being in a state of insufficient, like you don't have those backup stores, your body is going to slow down your brain and burn off your muscle. If you're at 11% body fat, your body is, someone who's at 11% body fat will not burn body fat as readily as someone who's at 40% body fat, right? So if you take a person who's at 40% body fat and you were to get them in a state of exogenous caloric deficit, which is not necessarily from just eating less because their body will slow down, we talked about, taking a person with 11% body fat and doing the exact same thing to them will cause a much different, and from a common sense perspective, also a much different biological response, simply because that body and that metabolism is much different.
Let's shift from the body to the brain. What do calories do to the brain? Like you wrote about this in your Smarter Subconscious chapter, which is pretty cool. So how do we use calories to make us smarter or less smart, as the case may be? Like what's the elevator pitch for that part of the book? Your brain
is one of the most caloric hungry aspects of your body. So if you want to talk about brain fog, if you've tried to diet, it sucks. Like you feel like garbage, and that's just because your brain is shifted into second gear, right? The first thing that's going to slow down is going to be your primary consumer of calories, which is your brain. So if you want to compromise every area of your life, instantaneously, undereat. Because your brain controls every area of your life, and if you put a pillowcase over it, which is basically what happens when you undereat calories, it doesn't work, and everything in your life will suffer. Everything.
So if people want to have a healthy, strong career and a healthy, strong personal life and love life and all of that, and they want to lose weight by cutting calories, is it going to work?
No. And in fact,
flat out no is exactly right.
And the data support that. So if you look at the actual epidemiological data that's been done and the surveys that have been conducted, the failure rate for the conventional approach, which is take fewer calories in consciously, just eat less and burn more calories off, the failure rate is 95.4%. So that means there's a 4.6% long-term success rate. Obviously, that's low, but just to put in perspective how low that is. So 4.6% success rate to do what we're all told is the physiologically correct approach. They also did a study, the American Cancer Society did a study on the long-term success rates of quitting smoking. Very interesting comparison because nicotine is the third most addictive substance in the world, trailing only heroin and cocaine. We all know how hard it is. Well, not all of us. A lot of us have tried.
Only you Microsoft guys.
Know people that have tried to quit smoking. It's incredibly difficult. Dave, guess what the long-term success rate for quitting smoking cold turkey? So this is with no Nicorette, no patch, no counseling, no social support, literally just cold turkey smoking cessation. What's the long-term success rate, you think?
It's got to be like 5 or 10%.
Yep, it's 5.5%, which is obviously very low, but it's not as low as 4.6%, which is almost a full percentage point lower in terms of success rate. So really, if you think smoking is hard to stop, try stopping eating. It's even harder.
That is a great quote. In fact, you need to make one of those little infographic quote things to put on Facebook because that is a summary of why it's not going to work for you to just decide to eat less. Like it's very, very pushy biologically. Okay, what about using calories to make you smarter as opposed to, okay, if you don't get enough calories, you're going to be slower because your brain has less fuel to think. I've definitely ascribed to that philosophy and have experienced it myself when I was 300 pounds and trying to eat low calories. But what about making you smarter? Like, what are the tips and tricks you've got in the book for us there?
In terms of just baseline energy, once you're at an energy sufficient state, I haven't seen any data around being in a state of energy surplus boosting brain function. However, things like nutrients in terms of amino acids and fatty acids and various vitamins and minerals enhancing brain function, absolutely. So absolutely, this is where you want to make sure you're taking in enough calories, but then ensuring that those calories are delivering a lot of things like the omega-3 fatty acids, a lot of things like essential vitamins and minerals. That's really where my research at least shows you're going to get the most brain bang for your buck.
I would agree with that. The one study I've seen that says there's a benefit to actually excess calories was looking at overfeeding and sex hormone binding globulin. So not to get too biohackery for everyone driving in rush hour right now listening to this, but a sex hormone binding globulin will stick to your testosterone, your estrogen, your progesterone, and make it less bioavailable. And there's a good study out there that shows when you overfeed, that is, you eat a caloric surplus, not that it's going to make you fat. It can, but if everything else is lined up right, it probably won't. But that it will drop your levels of SHBG, which you want to do. So having more testosterone or more progesterone actually can affect the energy and focus that you have and could definitely have an effect on how smart you are, or at least how smart you feel. Try being low on testosterone like I was because I was obese as a young man, and then feeling the difference between not enough testosterone and physiologically adequate testosterone. Like it lights the fire, not just in your genes, but in your brain.
And in your pants.
Yeah, that was the jeans I was talking about.
Oh, gotcha. Jeans with a J, not with a G.
I just realized I wasn't very clear on that. But yeah, the fire in your pants. Like having a sex drive is nice when you're in your 30s, but having a brain that works as well, and having that same passion for your work or your career or your mission is transformative. And it's kind of funny, but if you've been on a low calorie diet and you're recovering from being a low calorie vegan, even, which is almost by definition that's what happened. Certainly did for me when I was a raw vegan. You need to really consider what's going on with SHBG, and a period of overfeeding like I did, 4,000 calories a day for a couple years, didn't make me fat. So still, I was surprised it didn't, but it didn't.
Well, and it calls into question, Dave. I mean, we got biohackery. We can get a little metaphysically right now too of like, what is overeating? If the body is designed to balance us out and it sees that there's a surplus of energy, it could store it as fat, or it could say, that muscle tissue I've been wasting away, aka sarcopenia, maybe I should trigger some more muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah.
And get that going. Those hormones I turned off, to your point, maybe I can turn those back on. So while you are quote unquote, well, one, we can never actually know if we're in a state of caloric surplus. Like, you cannot measure that. You can't, because let's say you do eat an additional 400 calories. And let's say that part of those calories were some wonderful protein, and you triggered muscle protein synthesis at regular intervals, and you never did before. You may react to those 400 additional calories in with 600 additional calories out, because your body's synthesizing new tissue. So by overeating 400 calories, are you actually in a state of caloric deficit now? That's why these conversations are so convoluted and strange, because we can never actually, we can never know those numbers.
Even if you're in a calorimetry lab where they're measuring how much you breathe in and breathe out, they measure how much you weigh, all of your motion, how much heat comes off the body and all of that. I don't believe that the heat that comes off the body in a very careful university setting accounts for muscle synthesis or how many calories were used to make physiologically expensive hormones like testosterone versus to make essentially lipids that you burn for fuel. It's not going to be in that equation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just even at a most basic level, and this doesn't require the level of insight and passion that you and I bring to this subject, but just think about if you were God and you were designing an organism, wouldn't you say that if I give an organism insufficient fuel, I'm going to give it all kinds of ways to adapt to that? And so maybe, for example, beating your heart could be done, like your body could say, oh, I'm going to do that in a not very, precise is maybe the wrong word, but it's not like, oh my God, I'm in a shortage state, so I'm going to meticulously allocate this energy. An organism will obviously do that. It will obviously conserve when it needs to conserve. So this idea of eating less, creating a state of caloric deficit, or eating more, creating a state of caloric surplus, assumes that the body is in a fixed state, and it's not. It's in a dynamic state. That's the difference between biology and math. Biology is adaptive. And once you understand that, once you understand that your body is an adaptive organism, you trying to just deprive it of things doesn't even make common sense anymore.
It is on its face illogical when you have the assumptions that you and I just shared. And the problem is that most people are pretty good at basic logic, but when you feed them crap information and they put it through the little logic engine in the brain, you're going to come out with behaviors like the nutritional equivalent of wearing a hair shirt or self-flagellation, where you walk around all day sort of in a state of suffering because it must make you a better person because it's going to make you thinner. And I love that, you're flat out using the M word myth and just putting it out there like, this is BS, and here's a lot of references to back that up. Now,
well, Dave, just real quick, I appreciate that. And in terms of people being logical, that's why, this isn't the vast majority of our population's fault. If you are told that the cure for a disease is to get the bad blood out of your body, which is what we did a couple hundred years ago before we understood viruses and bacteria, then you'd figure out the most efficient way to bleed yourself. Should I slit my throat? Should I slit my wrist? What's the most effective way to get blood out of my body? Because the bad stuff is in my blood, right? And maybe you'd go to seminars where you'd learn more effective ways to bloodlet. And you'd go up to the mountains and do trust falls with your team members to help you be a more efficient bloodletter. Those are all very logical things to do if you believe that the cause of disease is bad blood and that you need to get blood out of your body. And if you believe what we've been told, what I was told as a personal trainer, that a calorie is a calorie, that calories are all that matter, and you just need to eat fewer calories and burn more, then everything we're doing makes perfect logical sense. That's why we need to change the fundamental paradigm, because logical steps in a flawed paradigm causes badness. And that's what we're experiencing now.
I agree with everything you just said. And it makes me question, just last week I was looking at ferritin levels in my blood and I couldn't donate blood. So I was bloodletting using a butterfly needle into a beaker. Are you telling me that I shouldn't have done that? Because now I'm all confused.
Maybe I should use a different analogy. Let's call calories the flat Earth theory of nutrition.
I'm actually not giving you a hard time in that I do donate blood, and I really did when I couldn't find blood donation. I donated my own blood into a beaker and poured it in the backyard to fertilize the plants. But that was because I was going after a specific biohackery thing, and you should not do this unless you're married to an emergency room physician who can pull the needle out if you pass out, just so no one dies.
Sounds good.
Your analogy though was perfect, by the way. I just had to laugh because look at me breaking the analogy. So one of the things that the Bulletproof people love is weird facts. I do this, today's weird fact of the day on my podcast. What did you come across in your research on calories? Like, what are the things no one would expect, or just the weird stuff that came up?
The weirdest fact. This fact blew my mind, and I start the book with it. It's in a story. So researchers over at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, did a study to see how many calories we're consuming, right? Because that's all we hear is that we're over-consuming calories. And of course, these are going to be approximations, right? Like there's no way to exactly know how many calories every single person is eating on average, but you can do it to the best of your ability. So they did that to the best of their ability, and they calculated based on food production and waste and yada, yada, yada at a GDP level, how many calories we were eating in the 1970s when we were basically at a state of healthy levels of obesity and such and such. And then they calculated what happened over time. And they found that in the modern era, we are consuming about 570 more calories per person. This is, of course, an estimate, but it's interesting, than we were in the 1970s. You say, wow, like that's there you go. Like, there's the cause of our obesity epidemic, right? Over consuming calories. But then you take a step back and you say, actually, that fact, rather than proving that we just need to eat less and exercise more, actually proves the exact opposite. It proves that there has to be a homeostatic regulation in the body, because if you do the math and you assume that that was a gradual increase in caloric intake, so you average it to about 300 calories more per person per year, we should have gained about 976 pounds per person since the 70s based on that caloric surplus. From 2006 alone, the average American should have gained about 400 pounds. And we haven't. Obviously, we've gained about 20 pounds on average. So where did 98% of the weight we should have gained go? Where did it go?
Into food marketing. It's really funny you throw out those numbers. About a couple of years, actually 3 years ago, when I did my 4,000 to 4,500 calorie a day experiment, I thought maybe for 60 days I would do it and I would gain 2 pounds. And I would say, look, the data says I should have gained 20 and I gained 2 pounds. But I did it for 2 years because I didn't gain weight, but I grew a 6-pack. And at the end of the 2 years, I did the math and I should have weighed 616 pounds. And like, the numbers are that big. And for you to apply that to just the whole population in general is brilliant, because, like, let's face it, none of us, okay, maybe not. There's probably a couple of us who weigh about 900 pounds, but not very many. So what that means is our core assumptions are wrong. And every time you feel guilty when you pick up a piece of food, especially one dripping in butter, the way broccoli should always be served, then that guilt is based on a false assumption, and you internalize that assumption to the point that it became a neurological response, which is what guilt is. Mm-hmm. So the way to deprogram that is to actually put salt on the broccoli along with the butter, and then eat that and feel good about it. And then notice, wow, I have lots more energy when I do this, and I feel better and I have more energy, and my love life improved, and I felt better at work, and your life changes. And how long does it take? I mean, I know from my work with clients, but in your book, you mention an amount of time it takes for someone to notice a difference.
In terms of non-scale based differences, because I am as much as I hate calories, the only thing that I hate more is a scale, because
mirrors are better than scales. We agree.
Yes. And tape measurers and jeans are also great measures as well. The way you see, so personally, I'm a little bit more concerned with getting immediate results in terms of my core function. Like the reason I'm here, the reason you're here, the reason all your listeners are here, are not to weigh a certain amount and is not to have a certain level of body fat percentage, right? Unless you're a professional model, That's not why you're here. Your purpose is something much grander than that. So you will start to be able to better execute your purpose 24 hours, no question. Just like if you put,
Yes.
I mean, it's not that, and the fact that we have to say this, Dave, again, it's just a reminder of like, this is such a big problem that we should all just wake up and be so passionate to solve, because the idea that eating enough and good quality stuff makes you feel better.
Duh.
Like putting premium gas in your gas tank versus putting kerosene in your gas tank will make your car run faster and better immediately.
It seems like such common sense, but bringing some of that, common sense back into the national discourse on nutrition is something. It's a mission that you and I both share. One of the ways that you can help that, Jonathan, is give me the elevator speech for debunking the calorie myth. Like, how should people who hear this, who understand, who've experienced the power of butter in their daily life, like, how should they tell their friends in 1 or 2 sentences that calories are stupid?
What?
Or maybe that was it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I would just say before anyone knew what a calorie was, everyone was slimmer and healthier. So how could counting calories be required for health? And then they'll respond, your friend will respond, well, we're not as active as we were back then. And then you could actually say, well, I mean, then we could get into some other studies that actually show that we're burning just as many calories as we were historically. And in fact, we're burning about as many calories as modern hunter-gatherer tribes, because when you are more active, your body just burns fewer calories when you're not being active, because again, it's trying to balance itself out. So the quick elevator pitch is just that we never counted calories before we had a problem. So how could counting calories be required to solve the problem?
That is a great summary. Now, Jonathan, you are the only guest on the show who's ever escaped the final 3 questions, because I forgot to ask them when I interviewed you a while back. So now's my chance. Every single guest except you has answered this. What are the top 3 recommendations you have for people, not based on the calorie myth, but just based on your entire life's journey, for people who want to perform better, people want to kick more ass? Top 3 most important things you've learned.
Very first thing would be, if you own a bathroom scale, I literally want you to purchase a baseball bat. If you don't have one already, go outside into a safe area. If possible, videotape this. Just beat the hell out of your scale, because that will trigger an emotional release of this old model, because a scale is a physical representation of this suppressive, broken, shrinking model. Destroy that.
This is
physically
like
destroy that.
The fax machine in Office Space, but you want this with a bathroom scale? All right, I like that image already.
Exactly.
Do you have like a red stapler or a red food processor or something that's involved as well?
Well, no, Dave, I just have that dream, right? I just want people to blanket YouTube with videos of freeing themselves from the calorie myth by destroying their scale. So let's get that started.
I love it.
The second thing I would recommend doing is getting if at all possible, getting a membership or getting access to a bulk food provider. So find a farmer's market, join Amazon Subscribe and Save, join Costco, join Sam's Club. Find a place where you can just see and buy an abundance of brilliant food, because when you start shopping and looking at those kinds of places rather than convenience stores or traditional grocery stores, this idea of abundance and real food and buying it in bulk, like, people should be eating pounds of food. Pounds of food. And if you eat a Pop-Tart for breakfast, like, just think about it. If your goal is to eat 3 pounds of food today, you're going to have to eat a lot of Pop-Tarts to get there. So
there's 3 things at Costco worth talking about, just as a little side thing before we get to your final answer. Smoked sockeye salmon, avocados, and Kerrygold butter are all available at Costco. With those 3 things, you can have a pretty damn good day.
Absolutely.
I'll just say that. Anyway, so I don't want to take you off your roll here, but
no problem.
Costco has some bulletproof food in it.
Absolutely. So blow up your scale, get access to a lot of food in an affordable fashion. I personally love Costco. And then third and finally would be, if you own a treadmill, sell it.
They make good clothes racks. Come on.
I would say, yeah, the third thing would be free yourself, if at all possible, from the exercise more, mythology, because one of the most difficult ways to stay on track nutritionally is to try to do that while over exercising. Because if you want food cravings for the wrong kinds of edible products, the fastest way to do that is to perform the type of physical movements that we've all been told to do. So not only, Dave, have we been told to eat the wrong things, but we've been told to do the exact physical movements that make us crave them.
It's kind of funny how that works. Jonathan,
it's almost like someone thought about all this stuff.
Jonathan, it's been a pleasure as always. And I am so excited for people to be able to read the Calorie Myth. It is, it's a good book, and you've done your homework and you've done your research, and I appreciate that. Can you tell people where they can learn more about you and about your work?
Absolutely. For the book, just check out caloriemythbook.com. Massive amount of free resources there, and it'll also direct you to grab our free 28-day program as well as daily tips, which is pretty cool. You can get every single day. We'll send you a new tip on your phone or wherever, and also a 28-day quick start program. You'll also get links to our podcast, which is trying desperately to be as popular as the podcast we're on right now, but that is a Herculean task. So hop over to caloriemythbook.com, and everything else can be found there.
Thank you. We'll put links to all of those in the show notes as well, so people can find that when they come to the Bulletproof site, and make sure they can get hooked up with your book, and we'll include links to all the other stuff we talked about as well. Thanks again, Jonathan.
Thanks so much, Dave. It's always a pleasure.
All the research, we looked at what's the simplest thing somebody can do to become happier every day that is proven by science and that doesn't take a lot of time to do. And the first question, as soon as you open the book, is what am I grateful for?